I wasn't planning to snoop. I never did things like that. Trust was supposed to be the foundation of our marriage, or at least I thought it was. The day it all started falling apart wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no slammed doors, just me needing to borrow her work laptop because mine was acting up. Simple, right? She was out at a company event, and I had a project due that couldn't wait. I sat on the couch, stretching out, laptop warming my legs. The smell of her perfume lingered faintly on the keyboard, a small detail I would have cherished on any other day. I was about to log into my work email when a notification popped up, a new message. It wasn't addressed to me. I don't know what compelled me to click on it. Maybe it was the name that seemed too familiar. Jared, her coworker. I'd heard his name tossed around during dinner conversations. Jared said this. Jared handled that presentation. He was someone I thought I didn't need to think twice about. But there it was, a subject line that said more than I was ready to accept. Miss you already. My stomach tightened, but I still told myself it could be innocent. Until it wasn't. The email wasn't long. Just a couple of lines, but it was enough to flip my world upside down. The kind of thing you couldn't unsee, no matter how hard you tried. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to hold you again. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, heart thumping as I opened the email thread. I should have stopped there, but curiosity, or maybe desperation, pulled me deeper. Scrolling up revealed a whole string of messages, starting off innocently enough, like friendly office banter. But the tone shifted, and suddenly they weren't talking about spreadsheets or meetings anymore. Flirty exchanges turned to bold confessions, intimate details, and plans for nights they'd shared. Dates and places I recognized. Weekends she'd claimed she was working late. I sat there paralyzed. The worst part wasn't even the messages themselves. It was the realization that she had hidden this entire world from me. The woman who kissed me goodbye every morning had lived a second life, one filled with stolen touches and late-night rendezvous. I closed the laptop with a trembling hand and sat there in the dim living room, listening to the hum of the fridge. My mind kept replaying every lie she'd told me. The business trips, the late meetings, the casual mentions of Jared, as if he were just another face in the office crowd. Now I knew he wasn't. He was something much more dangerous. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Anger surged, but I needed time to think. Gripping the armrest, I tried to steady myself. What was I supposed to do next? How do you approach the person you've loved for years after finding out they betrayed you? She'd be home soon, oblivious to what I'd just uncovered. And when she walked through that door, smiling like nothing had changed, I knew I wouldn't be able to hold it in for long. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, the laptop resting on the coffee table like a loaded weapon. The messages replayed in my head over and over, as if my mind was punishing me by refusing to let go of the words. Last night was incredible. Miss you already. Those sentences carved themselves into me, raw and unforgiving. Every second I sat in that silence, it felt like the room was shrinking, pressing me down into the cushions. I stood up, pacing back and forth across the living room like a man who had just lost his compass. Was this what betrayal felt like? This tightness in the chest, the heat rising in the back of the neck, the way everything familiar suddenly felt alien? Our wedding photos stared at me from the mantel, mocking me with frozen smiles that once seemed eternal. I avoided looking at them for long, as if those photos held a truth I didn't want to confront. My phone buzzed on the table. I jumped, half expecting it to be her or even him. But it wasn't. Just a notification reminding me to pay the electricity bill. The normalcy of it felt almost cruel. I couldn't deal with normal right now. Not when I had just discovered that the life I thought I had built was more fragile than glass. My thoughts spiraled in every direction. Was this affair just physical, or was there something deeper? Was it ongoing, or had it already ended? Did she love him, or was he just a fling to add excitement to her day job? I hated that my mind was trying to rationalize this disaster, as if the details could make any of it hurt less. By the time I heard her car pull into the driveway, the air in the room had turned suffocating. I watched the headlights flash briefly through the window, then vanish as she parked. My pulse quickened. My fingers twitched at my sides, itching to say something, do something, lash out or demand answers. But a part of me wanted to wait, to observe her, see if she would lie to my face without hesitation. I wanted to know how deep the deception ran. The front door creaked open, and the familiar jingle of her keys landing in the dish by the door felt like a dagger to the chest. "Hey, babe," she called out, her voice casual, almost too normal. She wasn't even trying to hide anything. I stayed seated on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen like it held the answers to questions I hadn't yet asked. "How was the event?" My voice sounded strange to me, distant, like I was hearing someone else speak. She kicked off her heels, letting them drop haphazardly near the door. "Long," she sighed, stretching her arms. "You know how these work events are. Networking, small talk, drinks. I'm exhausted." She walked into the living room and plopped onto the armrest of the couch next to me. The scent of wine clung faintly to her breath, mixed with the same perfume that had been on the laptop earlier. For a second, I considered confronting her right then and there, just ripping off the bandage and watching her reaction. But something inside me hesitated. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of thinking she could manipulate the situation. No, I wanted to see her dig her own hole first. "You didn't miss much here," I said, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. "Just worked on some emails. Had to use your laptop, by the way." Mine was acting up. I watched her closely, waiting for even the slightest twitch of discomfort. Her body stiffened for less than a second, but it was enough. She quickly masked it with a forced yawn, stretching her arms again like she hadn't heard me. "Oh, that's fine," she said too quickly. "Nothing important on there. Nothing important." The lie rolled off her tongue so easily, I almost laughed. I had seen everything. Their plans, their messages, the intimate photos buried in an attachment I hadn't even had the courage to open yet. But hearing her deny it so casually hit differently. "How was Jared at the event?" I asked, testing the waters. She glanced at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Jared? Oh yeah, he was there. Barely talked to him, though." She smiled, as if that should ease any suspicion. "He's been busy with that big project I told you about." "Liar." She said it with such confidence, like she had rehearsed every word. I could feel the heat rising in my chest again, but I swallowed it down. There was no way she could know I had already seen her secret life. "Not yet." I leaned back, resting my arm casually along the back of the couch. "Funny," I said, pretending to think. "I feel like you talk about him all the time, but I don't think I've ever really met him." She shrugged. "He's just a work friend." Another lie, another layer of betrayal. I couldn't hold it in much longer. My fingers dug into the fabric of the couch as I fought the urge to explode. Every time she spoke, she was digging herself deeper, and it was almost unbearable to listen to. But I knew this game wasn't over. Not yet. I wasn't done watching her unravel, watching her try to juggle the weight of her own lies. She stood up, stretching again, then turned toward the kitchen. "I'm going to grab a glass of water," she said, disappearing around the corner. The moment she was gone, I let out a shaky breath. I needed to plan my next move, figure out exactly how I was going to confront her without losing my mind in the process. I wasn't sure if I wanted to yell, cry, or just leave. Maybe all three. The silence of the house returned, but it felt different now, heavier. My world had changed, and soon, hers would too. But first, I wanted to give her just enough room to hang herself with her own lies. Let her think she's safe. For now. She came back from the kitchen with a glass of water, sipping it as if the weight of the evening didn't sit on her shoulders. I watched her from the corner of my eye, my mind racing. How many times have we done this? Her coming home after work, me asking about her day, everything moving along like we were the perfect couple. I hated how normal it felt because now I knew that every normal moment was built on lies. She sat next to me, curling her legs under herself like she always did. She scrolled through her phone casually, flipping through her notifications. I stared at the light from the screen reflecting on her face, wondering if she was checking for a message from him. I wanted to say something sharp, something that would cut through the fake peace lingering between us. But instead, I played along for just a little longer. "What's the plan for tomorrow?" I asked, leaning back like I didn't have a clue about what I'd seen. My voice was steady, but inside, the anger twisted like a blade. She didn't even look up from her phone. "Another workday. Same as usual. I've got meetings and then we're having a team lunch." Should be home around the usual time. Another lie. I knew that because I had seen the message she sent to Jared, confirming they'd meet at that same hotel near the office. I could almost picture it in my head. Her sneaking off during lunch, spending hours with him, and coming home to me with that same fake smile. My fingers curled into fists, but I kept my face calm. She flipped her phone face down on the couch, finally giving me her full attention. "You're quiet tonight," she said, leaning closer and placing a hand on my arm. Her touch used to feel warm. Now it made my skin crawl. I forced a chuckle. Just tired, I guess. Her eyes searched my face, and for a second, I wondered if she could sense the storm brewing behind my expression. But she didn't ask any more questions. She just nodded and leaned back into the cushions, her head resting against my shoulder. My muscles tensed at the contact, but I didn't pull away. Not yet. I turned to look at her, taking in every detail. The way her hair fell across her shoulder, the way she absent-mindedly tapped her fingers against her knee. She looked so peaceful, like someone without a care in the world. But all I could think about was how she had kissed him, touched him, and sent him messages filled with words I thought were reserved for me. "Remember that weekend in the cabin?" I asked suddenly, the words slipping out before I had time to reconsider. Her eyes lit up, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "Of course. That was such a great trip. I still think about it sometimes." She tilted her head, studying me. "Why'd you bring that up?" I shrugged, pretending to be lost in the memory. But I wasn't reminiscing. I was thinking about how that weekend was one of the times she had stayed late for work, when she probably wasn't at work at all. The thought burned, but I kept my composure. "We should do something like that again soon," I said, playing the part of the loving husband. "Just the two of us?" She grinned, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "I'd love that." I wanted to scream, to push her away and confront her right there. But no, this wasn't the moment. I had to be smart. She wasn't going to squirm her way out of this. I needed her to know I wasn't just some blind fool who'd forgive and forget. She yawned and stretched, her head falling back against the couch. "I'm going to head to bed soon. You coming?" I shook my head. "I'll stay up for a bit. Just need to clear my mind." She nodded, kissed me again, and stood up. I watched her walk away, my eyes following her until she disappeared down the hallway. I heard the bedroom door close softly, the lock clicking into place. I sat there for a few minutes, my mind racing. I couldn't stop thinking about the messages, the way she described how he made her feel, the things they did together. Every detail was like a stab to the gut. I picked up the laptop again, reopening the conversation thread. There were dozens of messages, some recent, others dating back months. My hands trembled as I scrolled through them, each one dragging me deeper into a pit I wasn't sure I'd climb out of. Then, I saw something that made my breath hitch, a message from Jared from just 2 nights ago. "It's getting harder to hide this. What if he finds out?" My grip on the laptop tightened. She wasn't just cheating. She knew what she was doing was dangerous. She knew there was a chance I'd find out. And yet, she kept doing it. That was the part one couldn't wrap my head around. How could someone who claimed to love me risk everything like this? I wasn't ready to confront her, but I wasn't going to sit around and play dumb, either. I needed more. Something concrete. Something undeniable. The messages were damning, sure, but I wanted to see her try to lie to me when there was no way out. I closed the laptop and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, I'd stop pretending. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling as the faint glow of the moon crept through the blinds. The sound of her steady breathing beside me felt like a taunt. I wondered how many nights she had fallen asleep like this, content, while I lay clueless next to her. My mind churned with possible ways to confront her. Should I do it in the morning over breakfast? Or wait until she got back from meeting Jared tomorrow? Should I go directly to her workplace and make a scene? No, that would make me look like the fool in public. I didn't want to be the man who lost control. I wanted her to see that I was fully aware of her betrayal and wasn't going to give her an inch to wriggle out of it. By the time dawn broke, I had a plan, and it wasn't subtle. I got up before she did, slipping out of bed without making a sound. As I made my way to the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee brewing helped ground me, but my mind was racing. I needed to act smart, If she saw me fuming or suspecting anything, she'd go into damage control mode. I needed her to think everything was fine. When she finally emerged from the bedroom, wearing one of those oversized sweaters she loved, she looked just as carefree as the night before. "Morning," she mumbled sleepily, rubbing her eyes as she walked toward the coffee machine. I watched her pour a cup, sip it, and lean against the counter like nothing had changed. I studied her like she was a puzzle I had never quite figured out. The woman standing in front of me, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone, was a stranger. It hit me then, this wasn't the same woman I married. Or maybe she was, and I had just never really known her. "Any meetings this morning?" I asked, keeping my tone casual as I buttered a slice of toast. She nodded. "Yeah, a few. Shouldn't be too bad." Then the team lunch later. There it was again, the lie she didn't even flinch while telling. "I might be home a little later if we stay out longer." I smiled. "Take your time. I've got stuff to catch up on anyway." She smiled back, completely unaware of the trap I was setting. As she grabbed her bag and headed for the door, I followed her with my eyes, waiting until I heard the car start and pull out of the driveway. The moment she was gone, I sprang into action. I wasn't going to let her spend the day in bed with him while I sat here stewing. No, I was going to make sure she had no choice but to face me when she got back. I opened her laptop again, scrolling through the messages until I found what I needed. Jared had sent her the details of their meetup, an address for a small hotel on the edge of downtown, the time they were supposed to meet, and even a flirty comment about what she should wear. My stomach churned, but I pushed the nausea aside. This wasn't the time to be weak. I grabbed my phone and texted her, "Hope your meetings go well today. Love you." She responded almost instantly, "Love you too. See you later tonight." It was almost laughable how easily she lied. I could feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't done yet. I needed her to think she was safe until the very last moment. I spent the rest of the morning preparing. I wanted every piece of evidence ready for when she walked through that door tonight. I printed out some of the worst messages. The ones where they detailed the weekends they'd spent together, the things they had done, the lies she had fed me to cover it all up. I didn't print everything, just enough to strip her of any chance to deny it. By noon, I was pacing the living room, waiting for her next move. I kept checking my phone, half hoping she'd text me and admit everything on her own. But of course, that didn't happen. She was too deep into her lie to confess now. It wasn't until early evening that I got the confirmation I was waiting for. Her car pulled into the driveway, the sound of the engine cutting off like a signal that the game was about to begin. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline flooding my veins. I gripped the stack of printed messages tightly, my fingers crumpling the edges of the paper. The front door opened, and there she was, kicking off her shoes like it was just another normal day. She set her bag down, looked up, and smiled. "Hey, how was your day?" I didn't smile back. I couldn't. My body was stiff, frozen between rage and restraint. "Fine," I said shortly, watching her every move. She hesitated, her eyes scanning my face as if she could sense that something was off. "You okay?" I nodded toward the couch. "We need to talk." She froze, her hand tightening around the strap of her bag. "About what?" I gestured toward the stack of papers sitting on the coffee table. "Why don't you sit down and take a look?" Her eyes flicked to the papers, and for a split second, I saw panic flash across her face before she quickly masked it. She walked slowly to the couch, sat down, and reached for the top sheet. Her fingers trembled slightly as she read the first few lines. I didn't say a word. I wanted her to sit in the silence, to let the weight of what she had done settle over her like a crushing wave. Her breathing quickened as she flipped through the pages, each message hitting her like a slap to the face. By the time she reached the end, her knuckles were white from gripping the papers so hard. She set them down slowly, like they were fragile, then looked up at me. I can explain." I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Don't." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I could see her brain working, trying to piece together a way out of this. But there was no way out. Not this time. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "How long has this been going on?" My voice was steady, controlled, but every muscle in my body was ready to explode. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting to the papers, and then back to me. It's not what it looks like, she whispered. I let out a bitter laugh. It's exactly what it looks like. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't mean for it to happen. Don't, I said again, my voice sharper this time. Don't insult me with excuses. She wiped at her eyes, but the tears didn't stop. I love you. I never stopped loving you. Yeah. I leaned back, arms crossed. Did you tell Jared that while you were in bed with him? She flinched like I had slapped her. For the first time, she was speechless. I stood up, towering over her, the papers still scattered on the table between us. The silence stretched on, suffocating us both. I trusted you, I said quietly. And this is what you do to me? She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the fear that she had lost control of the situation. And for the first time all day, I felt a small spark of satisfaction. Now she knew what it felt like to be trapped. The tears came fast now, streaming down her cheeks like she thought they'd wash away what she'd done. I didn't move to comfort her. I didn't even blink. I let her sit in her mess, choking on the weight of it. Please, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Please let me explain. Explain what? How she'd carried on a secret affair for months without me noticing. How she'd kissed me goodnight while texting him under the covers. No, I didn't need her explanations. I needed the truth, raw and unfiltered. I sat down across from her, keeping my distance. Fine, I said, my tone cold. Explain? She sniffled, wiping her face with the sleeve of her sweater. Her shoulders shook as she struggled to form a sentence. It wasn't supposed to be serious. At first, it was just harmless flirting. I clenched my jaw. Harmless. As if flirting wasn't the spark that ignited everything else. She continued, stumbling over her words. It started at the office holiday party last year. We had a few drinks, and he was just there, listening to me, making me laugh. I didn't think it meant anything at the time. Her voice cracked, but I didn't flinch. But it did mean something, I said, leaning forward. Didn't it? She nodded slowly, like a child admitting to a broken vase. It got out of hand. I didn't plan for it to go this far. I let out a hollow laugh. So what? You tripped and fell into his bed? No, she said quickly, her voice rising. It wasn't like that. I didn't want to hurt you. But you did. The words were like a knife. And for a moment, I saw her wince. Good. She should feel every bit of the pain she'd inflicted. Tell me, I continued, my voice steady but laced with venom. How many times did you not want to hurt me? Was it every time you met him in secret? Every time you sent him those messages? Her breath hitched, and she buried her face in her hands. I thought I could stop, she sobbed. I told myself it would end. Then why didn't it? I asked, my voice slicing through her excuses. You had 100 chances to stop, but you didn't. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. I was scared. Of what? I snapped. Getting caught. She nodded, but then quickly shook her head. No, I was scared of losing you. I let that sink in for a moment. The audacity of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was scared of losing me while she was sneaking off to meet him? It was almost laughable. Ironic, isn't it? I said bitterly. You were scared of losing me, but you didn't care enough to stop betraying me. Her lip quivered, and she reached across the table, her fingers brushing against mine. I pulled my hand back like her touch burned me. Don't, I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. I still love you, she whispered. I never stopped. You don't love me, I said, standing up and pacing the room. You love the idea of getting away with it. You loved the thrill, the secrecy. Don't confuse that with love. She sobbed harder, her shoulders shaking as she tried to control herself. Please, we can fix this. Fix this? I spun around, glaring at her. You think this is something we can fix with a few apologies and tears? You broke us. Her eyes darted around the room like she was searching for an escape route, but there wasn't one. She was cornered, and she knew it. I'll quit my job, she blurted out. I'll block his number. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't leave me. I crossed my arms, watching her unravel. The woman who always had everything under control was now a crumbling mess, begging for forgiveness. A part of me enjoyed seeing her like this, weak vulnerable, stripped of the power she had when she thought I didn't know. But another part of me felt sick. This wasn't the woman I married. Or maybe it was, and I'd been blind to who she really was. You'll block his number? I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You should have done to the moment he sent the first flirty text. But you didn't. You let this happen. Her sobs quieted, and she wiped her face again. I was stupid. I know that. But I'm begging you, don't throw everything away. I laughed bitterly. Don't throw everything away? You already did that when you climbed into bed with him. She flinched, and for a moment, we both stood in silence. The weight of her betrayal hung between us like a storm cloud ready to burst. Then, a thought hit me, something that made my stomach turn. Did you ever think about what would happen if I found out? I asked. Did you picture this moment? She shook her head. I didn't think you'd find out. I nodded, my jaw tightening. And that's exactly why you kept doing it. You didn't think you'd get caught, so you didn't care. Her face crumpled, and she covered her mouth to stifle a sob. But I wasn't done. Was I just a convenience to you? I asked, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Was I just the guy you came home to when Jared wasn't available? No, she cried. You're my husband. I love you. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the woman who stood before me was still the same person I had fallen in love with. But the evidence was scattered across the coffee table, and it told a different story. I turned away, running a hand through my hair. My thoughts were a tangled mess, and for the first time all day, I felt the exhaustion weighing on me. Go to the guest room, I said quietly. What? She asked, her voice trembling. I can't be around you right now, I said, not meeting her gaze. Go to the guest room? She stood there for a moment, like she was waiting for me to change my mind. But when I didn't, she slowly made her way down the hall, her footsteps heavy. I heard the door click shut behind her, and the silence that followed was deafening. I collapsed onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. The woman I loved had shattered everything we built, and now I was left holding the broken pieces. But this wasn't over. Not yet. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that makes you feel like you're being suffocated by your own thoughts. I sat on the couch for what felt like hours, staring at the mess of papers on the coffee table. Her words replayed in my head like a broken record. I love you. I didn't want to hurt you. We can fix this. Fix what? There was no fixing this. Not after everything I'd seen. But as much as I wanted to walk out that front door and leave her behind, something held me back. Was it habit or some stubborn part of me that didn't want to admit she had ruined me? I didn't know. What I did know was that I needed answers. Real answers, not the rehearsed excuses she had given me earlier. I stood up, grabbing the papers and stuffing them into a drawer. I didn't need to see them anymore. They had done their damage. What I needed now was clarity. I knocked on the door of the guest room softly at first, then harder when she didn't answer. After a moment, I heard the lock click, and the door opened just enough for me to see her face. Her eyes were swollen, her makeup smudged, and her hair was a tangled mess. She looked defeated. Good. We're not done, I said, stepping inside before she could shut the door again. She backed up and sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap like a child waiting to be scolded. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, keeping my distance. You've been honest enough to admit you cheated, I said, my voice cold. But you haven't told me everything. And if you want any chance of me listening to you, you're going to answer my questions. All of them. She nodded, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. Okay. I took a deep breath, gathering the strength to ask what had been burning in my mind since I found those messages. Did you love him? Her eyes widened, and she shook her head frantically. No, I swear I didn't love him. I raised an eyebrow. Then what was it? Lust? Boredom? A distraction from your life with me? Tears welled up again, and she covered her mouth with her hand. I don't know, she sobbed. I was stupid. It felt exciting at first, but it wasn't real. I never felt for him what I feel for you. I let her words hang in the air, weighing them against the evidence I had seen. If it wasn't real, why didn't you stop it? She looked down at her lap, her fingers still fidgeting. Because I liked how it made me feel. There was the truth. She liked the attention, the thrill, the feeling of being desired by someone new. It wasn't about him, it was about her. She had been selfish, and now she was paying the price. And what about me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Did you ever think about how I would feel if I found out? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Every day. I hated myself for it. I scoffed. You hated yourself, but not enough to stop. Not enough to tell me the truth. I was scared, she whispered. I didn't know how to face you. I pushed off the wall, pacing the room. So, you waited until I found out on my own. That's convenient. She stood up suddenly, grabbing my arm. Please don't give up on us. I'll do anything. I'll quit my job. We can go to counseling. Just don't leave me. Her desperation was suffocating. I pulled my arm away, stepping back. You think this is something we can fix with counseling? You didn't just cheat on me. You lied, you betrayed my trust, and you let it go on for months. She fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. I can't lose you. Her words echoed in my mind, but they felt hollow. The woman begging me to stay wasn't the woman I thought I had married. Or maybe she was, and I had just been blind to the cracks in our relationship. I knelt down in front of her, grabbing her shoulders gently. Why did you do it? Don't tell me it was a mistake. I want the real reason. She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine for forgiveness that I wasn't ready to give. I felt invisible, she whispered. At work, people noticed me. Jared noticed me. And when I came home, it felt like you didn't. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I staggered back, standing up and running a hand through my hair. So, this is my fault? No, she cried, shaking her head. I'm not blaming you. I'm just trying to explain how it happened. I laughed bitterly. You cheated because I didn't notice you enough. That's what you're telling me. She stayed silent, tears dripping onto the floor. I paced the room, trying to make sense of what she had just said. Maybe she had a point. Maybe I had gotten too comfortable, too distracted by work, assuming that everything between us was fine. But even if I had, that didn't justify what she did. I won't forgive you, I said, my voice firm. Not now. Maybe not ever. Her sobs grew louder, and she reached for me, but I stepped back. Please don't say that. We can fix this. No, I said, shaking my head. You can't undo what you did. She crumpled onto the floor, her hands covering her face. I watched her for a moment, feeling a strange mixture of anger, sadness, and emptiness. I wanted to hurt her the way she had hurt me, but I knew that no amount of yelling would fix what had already been broken. I turned and walked out of the room, shutting the door behind me. My heart pounded in my chest as I made my way to the living room, collapsing onto the couch. The silence of the house pressed down on me again, but this time it felt different. It wasn't suffocating, it was liberating. She had broken me, but she wasn't going to control what happened next. That was my decision to make. And for the first time since I found those messages, I felt like I had the power to decide where my life went from here. The house was eerily quiet again, but this time, the silence didn't feel like it was closing in on me. It felt like a pause, a moment suspended in time where everything that had been broken was laid out in front of me, waiting for me to make the next move. I sat on the couch, head in my hands, staring at the floor as memories flashed through my mind like a highlight reel of everything I'd once believed in. Our wedding day, the nights we stayed up talking about the future, the trips we took when we didn't have much but were happy anyway. All of that felt like it belonged to another life now. Her words echoed in my head. I felt invisible. As much as I hated to admit it, part of me understood what she meant. I hadn't been the perfect husband. I had gotten lost in work, taken her for granted. Maybe I didn't compliment her enough or notice the small things like I used to. But none of that justified what she had done. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through the messages I had saved, the ones between her and Jared. Reading them again only deepened the ache in my chest. The way they talked about each other, the way she laughed at his jokes through texts, the plans they made to meet in secret. It was too much. I put the phone down and leaned back against the couch, exhaling a long breath. I had to choose between two options. I could try to salvage what was left of this marriage, or I could walk away and rebuild without her. Neither option felt good. One was like trying to glue shattered glass back together. and the other was like ripping off a part of myself and learning to live without it. I heard the guest room door creak open, her footsteps soft as she made her way toward me. I didn't turn around. I waited for her to speak, and when she didn't, I finally looked up. She stood there in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself like she was shielding herself from the cold. "Did you come to tell me more lies?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. She flinched but didn't back away. "No, I just wanted to know what you're thinking." I let out a bitter laugh. "You really want to know?" She nodded, tears welling up again. "I don't want to lose you." "You already did," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. They hung in the air, heavy and final. Her knees buckled slightly, and she gripped the door frame to steady herself. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. "That's the problem," I said, standing up and facing her. "There is no fixing this. You didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice." Over and over again, she sobbed quietly, her shoulders shaking. I watched her, but the anger that had been burning inside me earlier had dulled. What replaced it wasn't forgiveness, but something colder: acceptance. "I loved you," I said quietly. "I gave you everything I had, but you didn't respect that. You didn't respect me." "I did," she choked out. "I made a mistake, but I loved you." "Love doesn't look like that," I replied. "It doesn't look like sneaking around and lying to my face." She sank to the floor, her head in her hands, and for the first time that day, I felt the weight of everything lift slightly. I wasn't forgiving her, but I was letting go of the need to punish her. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want an apology anymore. I just wanted to move forward without this betrayal following me like a shadow. "I need space," I said firmly. "I don't know what's going to happen next, but I can't make any decisions with you here." Her head snapped up, panic flashing in her eyes. "Are you leaving me?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But right now, I need to be away from you. I need to clear my head without you trying to convince me to stay." She crawled toward me, grabbing my hand, but I pulled away. "Please," she sobbed. "We can go somewhere, just the two of us. We can fix this. Don't leave me." I shook my head. "You don't get to decide how this goes." "Not anymore." Her sobs filled the room, but I was already walking away. I grabbed my keys and my jacket, heading for the door. My heart pounded as I turned the knob, but I didn't hesitate. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. The cool evening air hit my face, and for the first time all day, I felt like I could breathe again. I didn't know where I was going, maybe to a hotel or a friend's place, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was finally in control of my life again. I walked down the driveway, the sound of my footsteps echoing against the pavement. With each step, the weight on my chest lifted a little more. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wasn't the man who could be broken by her anymore. And that was enough for now.